How do you describe this shift that needs to happen in masculinity without saying, like, we need to feminize the masculine? Because that's where a lot of people really react against. Like, I don't want to be feminized. Oh, man, am I a woman?
Welcome back to The Zone. Guess what? It's okay to be a traditional masculine man. As an old seasoned dude who's pretty much seen it all, I'm going to lay out some facts about traditional masculinity, and we'll take a look at a diverse group of men who are both conflicted and convicted about the subject. No sugarcoating, no beating around the bush. Here we go.
This is the Boulder Zone, the fusion of masculine insight and entertainment.
This is Sparta!
Here's your host, Marco Boulder. And now, a Boulder Zone news brief, brought to you by ITV.
For the first time in its history, the American Psychological Association released guidelines concerning men and boys, saying that so-called traditional masculinity not only is harmful, but could also lead to homophobia and sexual harassment. And the main thrust is that traditional masculinity, which you are the great defender of,
that's called
by the
being
way,
a man, by the way.
marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole
Stoicism and
harmful.
Competitiveness are now evil things. They're harmful. It's harmful to be stoic. It's harmful to be competitive.
It's psychologically harmful, and socialising boys to suppress their emotions causes damage.
So what we've got to do, you've got to sit your boys down. I've got 3 boys. Well, I've really got this wrong. I should have, rather than saying to them, come on, lads, life's tough, let's crack on. How are we going to deal with life's problems? You know, if you lose at football, come and have a chat with me. Let's play. Rather than saying like I used to, which is, you've got to play a bit better, son. Score more goals, son. This is how you do it, son. Let's go and train, go and practice. Let's dig deep. Let's be strong. Let's be stoic. Be competitive, let's try and win. Oh no, I got it all wrong. Actually, what I should have done was say, come here, come. Have a good cry. Come on, keep crying. And next day, come on, keep crying.
No.
The only answer to everything in life is to keep crying.
That's absolutely not what they're saying.
Don't be stoic.
What they're saying.
Don't be competitive.
is
Stoicism and competitive is harmful.
Yes,
What a load of nonsense.
trapping boys in that stereotype of masculinity.
Who's trapping them?
Is harmful.
What
and
a load-
not
who's
allowing
trapping
them
boys
to be in
to
touch
be
with
stoic?
their emotions. So, for instance, if they can't always compete at top level in sport, which I know you want them to, there might be a time when they have to accept that.
Sure.
And that doesn't mean that they're failures.
It doesn't mean they have to stop
just
blubbing
means-
either, does
just
it?
means that they're human. And if
I am in the room.
What a load of
I think they're
flannel.
saying allow men to balance.
Right.
All of that
Sorry,
traditional masculinity.
just to read the
with
news.
Also
Just to read the news
the
release.
emotional side.
I know what you think they said. Let me
Yes.
just read you what their news release actually says.
Yes.
The main thrust of the subsequent research is that traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is harmful. Those are the 4 things which, of course, drove Andy Murray to be a great champion. So they're now all banned, everyone.
No,
Instead,
that's not
you
what
take
they're
the
saying.
crying. I don't mind him being emotional, knowing his career's over. Perfectly rational. He's a champion. You know, I get the emotion, the raw emotion. That's fine. But you can't now be stoic, competitive, dominant, or aggressive as a
You can
sportsman.
be all of that as long as that's not all you are.
That's not what it says. It says
Traditional
it
masculinity
says they're
ideology has been
harmful.
shown to limit male psychological development, constrain their behaviour, result in gender role strain and gender role conflict, and negatively influence
What a
mental
load
health and
of
physical
flannel.
health.
Absolute flannel.
I don't think you're right. I think
I'll tell you what's
you
happening.
admire Andy Murray for all of those traits.
A bunch
and
of
his
radical
being in
feminists
touch with
are
his
trying
emotions.
to extinguish
My God.
masculinity
Sorry, it's the American
and being male.
Psychological Association.
Yeah.
It's not a bunch of radical feminists.
Yeah, they are.
They're
They are.
not.
No, the whole agenda is being driven by radical feminists who want to expunge masculinity and people being male, men
Just
behaving like men.
Want balance.
It's just nonsense.
Don't be trapped. Be
Well,
more Andy Murray.
any young boys who are watching this, I've got 3 sons. I like to think they're stoic, competitive, when they play sport, dominant and aggressive. They're all good things in the right way. They're all good. They're not harmful. So no harm being any of those things. In fact, they're good things. Don't let these people tell you you can't be stoic.
they're also not
Or you can't be
exclusively
tough.
masculine. I just like to
Or you
point
can't be
out.
strong. Or you can't be any of those things. What have we become in this country? We're now being stoic is wrong. How would Winston Churchill have survived? Seriously, you
Winston
can't be
Churchill
stoic.
was in touch with his emotions. We know.
No, I've got no problem with
He
being in touch
cried.
with your emotions. But Winston Churchill couldn't be stoic or competitive, dominant or aggressive. Really? Well, how would he have won the war then? How would he have won the war? Tell me that, radicals. How do you win a war against the Nazis if you're not stoic, competitive, dominant?
We went there.
We went there. Yeah, we went. Because actually, these are great characteristics, actually. And they're male. Yes, they're masculine.
They're not just,
I think
excuse me.
stoicism is not necessarily predominantly male.
Well, neither is competitiveness, dominance, and aggression. I'm capable of all of those things.
Oh, so women are allowed to be all those things, but men aren't. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying they're not exclusively rich and
Do you think they're harmful, Suzanne?
They're not.
Is it harmful
I
as
think
the
if you
as the
feel-
main thrust reveals?
I think if you feel that that's all it is to be a man, then yes, it can be harmful.
Nobody's ever said it's all that to be a man.
I think that that's what they're saying.
Oh, rubbish. You've got no idea what they think they're saying.
The traditional masculine man. I'm talking about a man who embodies strength, courage, independence, and leadership. Nowadays, the woke crowd view these qualities as negative. Well, I'm here to tell you, I wholeheartedly disagree. Sure, there are aspects that we should avoid, like cruelty and disrespect and crazy aggression. And yes, there's no room on the masculine path for an arrogant, harassing, angry jagoff either. But that doesn't mean we have to swing to the other extreme, put on pink hats, and become soft, subservient pushovers either. There is a middle ground, and that is what I'm going to tackle today. To you men, here's the deal. You define what masculinity means to you. Don't rely on what society says or even solely on what I'm about to say. I'll give you my perspective, but you have to find your own truth. Okay, first, being assertive is still damn well okay. A man should go after what he wants, pursue his purpose, and be unapologetic about it. But here's the catch. Be assertive, but not unduly aggressive. There is a difference, and it's crucial. Don't blazingly trample over others to get what you want, but damn sure don't let anyone push you around either. Stand up for what you believe in. That is another important aspect. You don't have to bow down to popular opinions to conform to the masses or to please others. Take your stand, but remember, it should not infringe upon someone else's rights or beliefs. In a nutshell, that's the healthy, traditional, masculine mindset right there in itself. Now, let's take a deeper dive. First, don't fall into the trap of thinking that women are superior or putting them up on a pedestal. We are striving for balance here, not flipping the script. Women aren't naturally better just because they're women, and you aren't inferior for embracing positive masculinity. Let's keep it real and reject those extremes. Emotions. Yes, we're human, and yes, it's okay for men to show them. But we're not talking about becoming so in tune with our feminine side that we become a weepy puddle of spent estrogen. Moderation is the key. Go ahead, express your emotions, other than anger, but don't go overboard. You're still masculine, but you're still human too. Find that balance, my friends. Now, let's talk about being a gentleman. It's not about telling women they can't do something. It's about showing them they don't have to. I'll say that again. It's not about telling women they can't do something. It's about showing them they don't have to. It's still okay to open doors for her. to walk on the street side of the sidewalk, and to raise your protective level when she's around. But don't go all Jason Bourne. You're just being considerate and you're not MI6. It's still okay to be a provider and protector. Maybe just in a little more subtle way nowadays. Oh, and trust me, I've never seen a woman tell a man that she likes, "Don't hold that door for me. I don't need your coat." You know, that just doesn't happen. So don't worry about that. Just be a gentleman. Physical strength and toughness. Let's not kid ourselves. Men are generally physically stronger. Embrace it because it's the truth, and fuck the lies that modern society is feeding you. Take care of your body. The depth of that is up to you. Just be fit. Once started, it's not that hard. Listen, as intelligent as we think we are, we still need a healthy mind-body connection. And being physically strong helps us mentally battle the world when we have to. Competitiveness. The world, life has winners and losers, my friends. No movement will ever change this. So embrace your competitive spirit. Strive to be a winner and succeed, and don't get lazy and settle for their binary participation trophies or whatever. Channel your competitiveness professionally, academically, or athletically, wherever you are. Focus on aiming high and work your way up. Leadership. The male species is designed to be leaders, plain and simple. No neo-feminist group will change this either. So own that too. Now, that doesn't mean when your workout starts kicking in, we just start bulldozing over everyone. What it means is when the situation calls for it, just step up and step up like a boss. Know when to follow. We're evolved. And yes, gender roles have shifted, but that doesn't mean we have to give up or water down our natural tendencies to lead, achieve, excel, protect, and to provide as men. Okay, let's take a look at this group of guys set up by Vice who are discussing the challenges of being men in today's culture. Let's see how much of my prologue addresses their issues.
How you guys doing? My name's Krishna. Thank you all for being here and talking through masculinity, what it means to be a man, etc. I'm thinking to myself, what does it mean to be a man? To start, maybe we could just introduce each other to each other. And if you were to describe what it means to be a man or to be masculine.
My name is Tahoe. I'm a black man from the hood. When I was young, being a man, you had to be tough. You had to be hard. And now, to me, being a man is a lot different. Now, to me, being a man is knowing when to be soft. Knowing that you don't always have to run the charge. You can actually listen. You know what I mean? So things have changed a lot over the course of the years for me.
I'm Griffin, and I don't identify as a man. I'm non-binary. I still have elements of, my identity that are masculine, elements that are feminine, elements that don't fall within that range. And I personally just don't feel tied to the norms or the confines of gender at all.
Well, welcome.
My name is Dylan, and I think that the notion of masculinity is just something that can be possessed by man or woman. Man, woman, non-gender conforming person. What it means to be masculine is just changing and very fluid. But I think that, masculinity is something that just, you embody based off of just how you show up in this world as a man and just how you go about being your day to day.
How you show up. Interesting.
Yes.
What's up, guys? My name is Paul. I'm a fitness entrepreneur. I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 4 years old with my family. It's kind of funny how we're talking about it. My take on masculinity is is not about talking as much as doing. I think at its core, a man has to be efficient, competent, and be willing to do what it takes for themselves and their loved ones.
I was not always a good man. I was not always what you would call a healthy masculine man. And so as my life has changed, I've identified 5 points that I think make a truly masculine man masculine.
Okay.
I think point number 1 is a man who walks with God. Point number 2 is a man who stands on principle. Point number 3, which is a masculine man, is self-sacrificing. So someone who is willing to sacrifice for point 4, the people that he leads. A true man is a leader. And number 5, a masculine man is never a coward.
That's a lot there.
Yeah.
Let's get into that as we go on.
I think what it means to be a man is responsibility. As a man, it can come with a lot of power. And with great power comes great responsibility. In short words. That's it.
That's from Spider-Man, I think.
Yeah,
right?
that's what
Uncle Ben.
James.
Well, my name is James Killen, former United States Marine turned Air Force officer. Got a couple combat tours, but I'm also a father of 3 girls who mellowed me out. The idea of masculinity is something that I find interesting because it is changing, and I can actually see those changes in myself. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this panel.
Thanks for your service. Andre.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, men. I think my idea of a real man is, someone that gets the job done, and provides and all that. I don't even know what that means anymore, but I don't know. It's changing every day.
How do you think it's changing?
No, it just seems like everything is changing every day. It's like a new world order, so I have a hard time keeping up with stuff, so I feel like tomorrow it's going to be something else, and people are going to comment and be like, "You're wrong, it's this now."
It is hard to talk about some of this stuff because you feel like you might say the wrong thing.
I'm not really masculine myself, so I feel like I'm like the wrong person to ask.
Maybe the right person to ask. Christian.
What it means to be a man is to be a adult human male.
That's sort of a very formal definition, but I think that might be a good place to kick off because there's a lot of talk, of writing, of research these days that says there's a crisis in masculinity. Is there a crisis in masculinity? And if so, what is that crisis?
Thing that I see is a lot of deconstructing generational trauma. The be a man, boys don't cry, this, that, and the other thing. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why we see it as a crisis, because we're actually trying to redefine what it means to be a man, and none of us have any idea because we're just out here trying to be whoever we are.
Okay, let me help him out with that. Yes, differing philosophical perspectives on masculinity today makes it confusing to know what your role is as a man. That is the problem. Men nowadays are falling prey to perspectives that are political, that conflict with centuries of crucial responsibilities. Historically, men's traditional gender expectations were, as I mentioned earlier, as the protector, the provider, the tool bearer, the problem solver, all while displaying emotional stoicism in order to effectively carry out those responsibilities. But today, we're ridiculed for them. And why? So women can pick and choose where they want to apply equality? Truthfully, I don't know one man that is purposefully trying to oppress women. Yet that's what we're blasted with every day. Folks, a shift of culture of this magnitude is going to take time and patience, perhaps even a generation worth of time to make this shift. But rest assured, it will never be completely equal. And you know why? Because women really don't want to do the back-breaking labor that men has done eons. It's the same difficult work that required clearly defined masculine and feminine roles. That's what got us here today. And you know what? Men don't necessarily want women to do the work if they don't want to. You know, there's nothing wrong with a man who is secure in his masculinity, and he should not be coerced to change that.
That's right. I think that historically, being a man was rooted in patriarchy and misogyny. And now we realize how harmful that has been over the years. And so we don't really know how to define where we're supposed to be. And I think the reason, as they're saying, there's a crisis is because the box has gotten so small for just being, say, straight, just being a hetero, right? Because if you do anything, women judge you.
What do you mean anything?
If I dance a certain way, or if I wear my hair a certain way, if I dress a certain way, they go, real men don't do that. Real men don't do that. And so you get scared to move a certain way because you don't want to get judged or outed out of the accepted part of your community. And I think that kind of has us in an uproar, and we don't know where to be. Like, where's the safe place to be for men now? You know what I mean? And it's kind of disturbing.
You know, I was what you would call a toxic masculine male growing up. And I had good men that sewed into me, you know, they gave me good advice, but I never found manhood or never understood my place as a man until one day I humbled myself and I gave my life to the Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm telling you right now, walking with God changed my life forever.
Can you define toxic masculinity? Like,
I would say toxic masculinity is like what he was just saying, where you're using that leadership role or that aggressive nature in a harmful way to harm other people to get your way. So the biblical structure for manhood is very humble. It's self-sacrifice. It's not self-motivated, but it is motivated by principle and standing on what's right. So there is a clear-cut vision for manhood in the Bible that I live by, and I think our culture used to live by, and I think our culture has lost its way.
I think everybody sort of has a different definition of toxic masculinity. I don't find masculinity toxic in and of itself, but I do believe in bad men, and bad men exist. But does that mean every man is toxically masculine? No.
We were talking about a crisis on masculinity. I think that there's a lack of understanding there. So it's like masculinity, being masculine isn't toxic. It's just like there are portions of it that you can dive into that make it toxic.
Because I think a lot of what we think of masculinity is tied into patriarchy, right? Which is to say, like, for the longest period of human history, like, men dominated women and got the lion's share of stuff.
I think a lot.
Okay. That's the second time that patriarchy came up. So let me say something about that. I think what people don't realize is patriarchy is the result of gender roles and not vice versa. There's no denying that historically women's power and responsibility has been in the reproductive sphere, while men's responsibility has been in the productive sphere. Women have to reproduce to continue the species, and men have to produce to feed the species, so women can reproduce the species and men will feed them again, and so on and so on. The point is, we worked together. Both were equally important. Those were our obligations forever. That's why industry and government were male dominated. Because that was our job. We're the ones doing it. So what is called patriarchy today is simply men fulfilling the expected roles they were always responsible for. Women, you wanted a piece of that action? You got it now. More power to you. Women now have access to everything that men have access to: employment, education, but they're still not the ones in the coal mines or on the construction crews. It's still men carrying the lion's share of the hard work that it takes to maintain and operate this society. if there is an expectation that someone is going to go down with the ship, guess who it's going to be? Men, not women. Equality.
A lot of times, some people make masculinity into a caricature, like it has to be this alpha bro tough guy.
Exactly.
And I find the low key guy who, you know, is a really great father and a great husband and maybe not like drinking raw eggs every day to be a lot more masculine than the alpha bro who's going and like banging 20 women per weekend and not a responsible man. I find it more.
Okay. Listen. Don't confuse being an alpha with traditional masculinity. That's stupid. While men certainly fantasize about it, less than 10% of men meet the baseline of ever being an alpha.
Masculine to be a good guy.
I think the background of this is that we are saying that gender is this like real thing that has real ideas and implications. And Griffin, I'm wondering, as someone who identifies as non-binary, how does this conversation strike you?
Well, I think that it kind of becomes like irrelevant whether or not we attribute like having like a good ethical compass to being like masculine. Attributing that to like the gender constructs which we have made up, which are like somewhat pointless, like kind of just feed into needless roles that uphold the patriarchy without even knowing it.
Okay, what? Ethical standards are part and parcel to masculinity. You know, I'm sure he's talking about today's progressive definition. He's referring to that. I don't know. But rather than referring to this new progressive masculinity as whatever, I think they just call it masculinity.
A lot of those things are just things that people should be doing because they're like morally right. Like if you're in a family, you should probably support your family. And I really don't think that it has to do with like your manhood.
These characteristics that we're talking about are baked into an old system of domestic life.
I think that's actually where we get toxic masculinity. Like none of us can really describe what it is, but we can see it when it happens.
So we learn it, right?
Yeah.
This is something we learned from the world. It's something we learned from like TV and shit. And it's maybe something we learned from our dads too. Tell me about your dad.
My definition of manhood came solely from my relationship with God. It didn't come from my father. It didn't come from the good influences around me.
Is God a man?
Yeah, and God is a man. God is a father, and he's a good father. He's a perfect father. And so I think there is a clear definition of manhood where I guess that's where I diverge from everyone else in the room. I believe manhood is clearly defined by God. It is the perfect example of what a man should be.
Christian, I see you nodding your head.
I grew up in a divorced home. When you do grow up in a broken home and you don't have a father in the home, you recognize how important sort of both males and females are in raising a child and being in the home.
There's a balance between, you know, masculine energy and feminine energy.
Absolutely.
And I feel like there's both within everybody. And so there's a balance that a lot of people have trouble trying to like reconcile within themselves. Like, yes, being a man, you work hard, you take care of your people, but you got to be able to have that emotional side too, which is where the feminine energy comes in.
Y'all just like triggered something in my head when y'all was speaking about having both in the home. To me, I didn't really have it there. And it made me feel a way, but I think that I always wanted one. And so I wound up at a certain age going outside and trying to find what masculinity was outside. And so I went on the corner and there were 20 of us on the corner and none of us had dads. We were all messed up. And so we all taught each other the wrong way to love, to be loved. And then I think in society, there's way more people like that.
And a lot of kids who don't.
Yeah, you know what? Not having a masculine presence growing up, young men are messed up and they end up going out and searching for it and finding the wrong thing. Absolutely true. It's well documented. What I'm hearing here is, I mean, not necessarily here maybe, but people are saying that it's toxic to learn masculinity from your father. So in the absence of one, and if you can't learn it on your own, I guess that leaves the government to raise our kids and help our mothers out. Show of hands. Who's in favor of that?
Have fathers in the home, excuse me.
No, you're good, man.
Look for that father in the world or in a different way.
Yeah. Well, first, I think that like attributing like proper family values to like a heterosexual couple with children is like just not effective. Like I think that it's obviously like a heteronormative take to be like man and woman and then a child, and that's how you create like a good family. And whether it's like a single mother, single father, or like a queer couple, like I don't think that it's necessary to like attribute men and women to like certain roles in the household. I think that it's only due to nurture those gender norms that we follow.
Male and female matters. God gives you one of those identities, you take on that role. And now you're responsible for not or for fulfilling that role. There's a masculine crisis because men are not taking responsibilities for the God-given roles that they have in society. And so when you take away the need to say, God made you this or God made you this, now you don't have to take responsibility for not fulfilling what you were called to do.
When you do that, you also take away other things that somebody else may do. If I have a woman or a partner that wants to take on certain roles and I say, hey, those are my roles that God gave me in society, now I'm suppressing that person. Like at the end of the day, we're all human beings.
Okay. If you're in a relationship with someone and you suddenly go in and say, hey, that's my role, there's something dysfunctional happening here. I know that in relationships, that stuff is established in the front end. Is he talking about in the onset? Is that how he does it? Is that, how he did it? I don't know. But I don't think that's applicable here, because when you enter into a relationship, man, woman, whatever it is, you define what each one is responsible for. Men tend to be the ones that cut the grass and pound the nails and that sort of thing, but it doesn't have to be that way. Nobody's disputing that anymore. If he wants to do the laundry and she wants to cut the grass, fine. So just because somebody crosses your path and influences you another way that maybe you should be more masculine, you need to talk to your partner about that first. There's maybe some issues in you where you are rediscovering yourself. It happens.
Yeah, you define who you are and how you behave under God. That's what God gave us, free will.
But also, like, I think that the religious beliefs should not be used to like dictate how other people identify or how other people live their lives.
Humans need predictability. And when we put each other in these boxes, it gives us the opportunity to make decisions quickly. And I think that's what we're fighting is as a civilization at the moment, is the desire to put 7.5 billion people in specific boxes so that we can have some sort of predictability or stability in our lives. I was an emotionally abusive young man in my 20s because I had an idea of what my wife should do. And it caused a lot of stress.
Why were you the way you were?
I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of pent up rage. I had, some combat stress that I had to deal with also that I wasn't dealing with because men don't show emotion.
There is a social construct that benefits men. And so the responsibility that I've learned as I've gotten older is learning how to not enforce my power, learning over women, over people.
You're saying that role gives men more privilege, like an advantage and privilege. I'm saying that it is more self-sacrificing. I do not have free time. I do not have hobbies. I do not wake up during the day and do what I want to do ever. I'm thinking about my wife, my kids, my business.
But that's your decision, and that's not like a mandatory thing of your masculinity.
Well, if you believe that God is true,
I don't,
and you believe that He is God, then you do have that responsibility.
What privileges are you referring to? Like, what privileges do men have?
We've constructed this entire society to benefit us.
Break it down. Like, what privileges exactly?
Like,
okay, yeah, he's kind of on that kick. That's really not true. The men that built society didn't do it to have power over their wives. They actually did it to provide for their wives and their families. Here's a cloaked little factoid for you. Men show their love by providing for their family. That's why the whole "you make more money, mister, therefore you must have more power." That analogy just doesn't have legs. Listen, a man doesn't work 70 hours a week or 2 or 3 jobs to make more money than a woman does. That's not a thought in their head. They do it for women. They do it for their wives, for their daughters, for their sons, for their families. Why can't people understand that?
We talk about the wage gap, or if you look at Roe versus Wade, men controlling women's bodies.
Even if there might be.
Yeah, right. The wage gap is closing, and there's evidence to show that it's not even there. Roe v. Wade, abortions were overturned at the federal level, but they're still available in 20 states for those that want them.
Those privileges, there's also more men who commit suicide, more men incarcerated.
I think when you talk about like incarceration rates and things like that, like things that men are a victim of, I think that it's important to like recognize, like, I don't think that men are oppressed solely on the grounds that they're men. I think that men like experience oppression based on like the intersections of their identities, which is.
Well, no, I'm not trying to pick on that guy, but holy cats. Yes, they are. Men, especially the white male, is the most oppressed group in this country right now. How can you miss that?
You know, why we see like different like lower class jobs being worked by men, or like higher suicide rates, or like incarceration rates going up, because like men, like black men, brown men, indigenous men, queer men, trans men, etc. Those people like face oppression, they experience oppression, but it's not solely due to their identity as a man.
But I think dating and sex is probably a very interesting place to think about this, because it's changing field as far as like what people expect of each other.
I date in New York City a lot, and dating wise, there's a lot that's like asked of a man. Like first dates are like nightmares.
I've got a question. Yeah,
dude, it's like, I'm like, what do you want? They got like a checkbox, like, are you gonna pick me up? Are you gonna walk on the outside of the sidewalk? Are you gonna open the door? Are you gonna pull out the seat? Are you gonna pay for the meal? Are you gonna be interesting during the dinner? Are you gonna be funny during the dinner? And then when you walk home, are you gonna drop me off? Are you gonna watch me walk inside? And then are you gonna text me after? And it's like trying to defuse a bomb. Like if you think you're like red wire, blue wire, and you're like one little thing and you're just done. And it's like, I'm to the point where I'm like, I'm so tired of like paying $150 for a first date, and then you just ghost me. And the next week I'm like hurting for cash. I'm like, I could have really used that $150. Like, why did I have to, you know what I'm saying?
The trade-off of like going on a date and as the man being like, oh, this sucks, I have to pay, or as the woman being like, oh, this sucks, I might get murdered, is like a pretty big, imbalance.
Oh, hold up. Wait, what? Women murdered on the first date compared to men paying? That percentage is so small, you might as well never drive a car for fear of being killed in a crash, or taking a shower for fear of slipping and bumping your head and dying. Come on. You know, if there's a percentage for that, will someone comment and tell me what it is? I have not seen it. I look at numbers, but I haven't seen that one. Yeah.
On a first date, should the man, or whoever identifies as the man on the date, pick up the check? Show of hands, who thinks yes?
Yeah, should is a weird.
Yeah, should is a weird way to put it. Okay, sorry. How would you put it?
I very much love gender roles. I like masculine men, and I want my masculine man to pick the check up. My friends seem to be the same. My girlfriends seem to want that as well. But I have a male friend who was naturally doing that. And with the dates he was going on with women, they were offended that he like took the check. So I think like, hey, if this woman doesn't want him to pay and she wants to show she can pay, go off.
I think it's a
I think that situation is quite rare when women go off because they're not picking up the checks. The latest statistics I saw, and forgive me, I can't recall the organization that did it off the top of my head, but it was infinitesimal. It was like 1% of women pick up the check on the first date. And men are okay with that. I've talked to a lot of men, and I don't know one that on the first date they have a problem with doing that. And I think women like that. So that's why the number is so small. So his example there, it's, I think, more the exception than the rule.
Matter of preference, like, if someone picked it up for you, like, you develop a kind of rapport, respect with that person, like, so be it. If the other person, the woman you're with doesn't want that, then maybe it's not the match for that person. So I think it's dependent on the situation.
I think that there's such a thing as financial abuse, and men seem a lot of time, because they spend, that a woman has to be under them or owes them something.
I think that's when you get toxic.
Me personally, I love to take care of my partner. I love that feeling that I give them, that they're taken care of when they're with me. And that's when it's with friends, anybody. If you're with me, I got you.
Like, I guess what I'm hearing from you, Andre, is that there's like a lot of pressure to inhabit the masculine side of the social expectation. And yet you might not get the benefit that you would have expected generations ago. And that puts you in a weird position.
Yeah, well, we live in a city where there's 8 million people, and a lot of these girls, especially if you're really attractive, guys are hitting on them all day. So they feel like celebrities. You got so many options. I don't blame you. I'd be the same way. It becomes
There's
like
always somebody better.
I think technology has a big part to do with that now. Like modern times, like.
Oh, I think I just heard a reference to hypergamy. He was talking about the dating pool and the high level women being treated like celebrities, and somebody kind of chimed in there and said they're always looking. I didn't know we were going to go there with this, but hypergamy is it's an issue out there.
Online dating, Instagram.
Especially Snapchat. As a girl, you're gonna have 30 DMs a day.
Yeah, the DMs.
You know what I'm saying? Swipe it up on your picture.
I think that's a big reason why it can be tougher for some men.
Not successful.
I think what he's saying is there's a toxicity to femininity as well. There is a toxic side to both genders.
Well, I think anybody can be narcissistic, but I think that it's like weird to randomly attribute that to like women in New York because they're being complimented all day.
There's a term that's called absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, but that is, when we're talking about masculinity, that's what we've had. We've typically had that. We can do whatever we want, and we do it because we squeeze, we corrupt, we take. Historically, you take over things, places that you don't like, and you rape the women, and you take the gold, and you do what you want because you have that power. Now, when we see women have that power, we're like, whoa, she's literally just getting a taste of the power that men have had for centuries.
But on the flip side of this perspective of dating, of like the poor guy who goes on these dates and gets ghosted and it's a struggle to date. On the other side of that is men have more sex, men cheat more, they have more affairs. So if I'm a woman and I'm looking for a guy, I would be really selective. I would have a list of what I was looking for, and the guy would have to meet those standards and they would be high.
I think that over the last several years, the Me Too movement has given a lot of insight into what women are feeling in the workplace, what they're experiencing, how they're being abused and otherwise silenced, how institutions of power have kept them silent. And we've heard some really awful stories and some terrible shit. I want to hear from you guys what you think about what the Me Too movement did.
Oh, hold on. You're going to hear from me first on this. I can't believe people are still talking about that. The Me Too movement was an overall miserable failure. In its 6-month lifespan, it was never able to act as a legitimate vehicle for meaningful change because it had politically abstracted ideals. Let's hear where this goes.
Has it gone too far? What does it mean for you?
I think it's good for women to expose men who are doing evil things in the workplace. I think it's been a good thing in exposing sexual abuse. There's also the opposite side of that coin where women are allowed privilege to do certain things that men are not. So in the workplace, I was working at a place where a woman was grabbing me inappropriately, doing things that were inappropriate. And when you bring that up to your coworkers, you know what they say? They laugh and they say, you should be excited, right? So if a man is sexually abused, the stigma totally changes.
Well, I don't think Me Too necessarily is what prevented people from believing you in your story. And your story is valid. I'm not here to suppress that, but I do think that it's worth noting women are far more likely to be victims of sexual assault.
You just experienced a little bit of weakness that women feel most of the time.
When we're talking about constructs, you guys are saying we need to deconstruct masculinity. I'm saying there are unequal biases with both genders.
When it comes to it not necessarily being as viewed as valid, it happens to be the case because of other men, though. You know what I'm saying? Other men are the people that downplay that, and that's where we come back to the talk of, patriarchy and things like that.
Was put in place by men and is enforced by men.
Well, and I went for a walk to get dinner last night, and I walked several blocks because I wanted to check out a few things, and it was dark. Not a single time did the idea that I would be physically or sexually assaulted cross my mind. Not a single time. I can imagine that doesn't really work out for women.
It comes down to biological differences. As a man, you're more likely to be able to have more of a chance to fend off someone attacking you. As a woman, not really. So that's why, we have things like mace and tasers or having a gun.
Is it something about it's hard to admit that you're a victim?
We, as men, especially guys that grew up in super masculine houses, we don't really like to admit weakness.
Well, and it's in our language, right? Don't be a bitch, don't be a pussy.
Right.
It's very real.
We internalize that.
Yeah. But that's all examples of toxic masculinity. It's never to invalidate somebody's experience, but it must be obvious that these are rules and roles enforced by men and created by men.
Well, and toxic masculinity and power kind of go hand in hand. I mean, we're talking about peanut butter and jelly.
You know what it is? I think sometimes we got to go to work and if we're caught complaining about it, we're admitting weakness. It's you're not a man.
How does that feel?
It doesn't feel great, but that doesn't stop me from doing what I need to do. If you talk about a little bit of pressure that goes with it, yeah, there's a little bit of pressure. If you can withstand it, you become a successful man.
But what does that have to do with being a man? Surely a woman can do all those things, so why even attribute it to your gender?
If you're talking in terms of biological differences, generally men are more logical, right? More reasoning, more factual.
I disagree.
Based.
There is no scientific backing for that whatsoever.
I just think it's a commonly used stereotype. I mean, I'm not.
So I just maybe talking about, okay, you guys can say that.
Okay, yeah, I gotta chime in there. I think he meant analytical rather than logical, analytical versus emotional. There's studies that show that men are more analytical and women are more emotional, but logical thinking, it's pretty much even between men and women.
I think more about me. I'm more of a logical, factual-based guy. I have emotions. But, I don't let that deter me from what I need to do, my reasoning.
Do you talk with people about your emotions a lot?
I mean, I have friends. I have close guy friends I can talk to.
You do?
Yeah.
There's an interesting thing came out where, guys these days have fewer than 3 friends. It's hard for men to make friends with each other.
I think that's a big problem now in modern times. Because you hear about, the suicide rates going up. I think that's a big reason for it. Men aren't allowed to talk about it with safe people. So if you talk about masculinity crisis, that's the crisis right there.
I think that we have superficial relationships in those friendships, in which it's very surface level, coming back to what you're talking about. We don't talk about feelings and things like that. That comes back to how, you're brought up and how boys are taught in certain ways, how we go about talking to each other and how we go about expressing ourselves.
How much of this is men putting ourselves in a little box? I can tell you, I wouldn't have shared my emotions with people when I was younger. But I have people in my life now who I feel completely comfortable sharing my insecurities, my vulnerabilities, how I'm feeling. That ends up being one of the reasons why men end up with limited friends. Because, how many people can you actually feel like you can be open and honest with?
But there's something holding people back.
Yeah, I think the reality is that no one gives a shit about men's feelings. When we have a problem, we're expected to suck it up and be a man. Generally, that's why the male suicide rate is 3 times higher than women. Don't believe that? Do your own little experiment. Look at your social media. When a woman shares that she's down or angry, look at the outpouring of support and input that she gets from men and women alike. Conversely, if a man does it, the support is much less passionate and really significantly less.
And I think it's us. I think we're doing it because we're putting ourselves in this masculinity box, if you will.
I think that vulnerability for men oftentimes is viewed as surrender, and like that is you know what I mean, that's an example of weakness in which like someone can possibly take advantage of it, or it used to be viewed as such, you know, where it's like, all right, cool, like he cried, oh, that means he's soft, so now I can challenge him.
And this is something that I really struggle with as a black man that grew up in the hood. You couldn't be soft. You couldn't come outside. You know what I'm saying? So you had to take on this persona in order to be a quote unquote man. As I got older, I realized I still had to do that with women. I had to be a certain way for them to look at me as a man. And if I didn't perform in that manner, they also called me a bitch. As progressive as I may want to be, is the world accepting of that as a whole? Because even if the other men don't like it, but the women like it, I might be like, I don't care what the guys think, as long as the women like it. But there are spaces where the women will be like, he wants a finger in his butt. Sorry.
No, let's talk about fingers in the butt.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's not my type of guy. He's not my type of guy. And I can't be open with sex or accepting having gay friends. Pardon, you know.
That's what you like?
But I can't, right. You can't be open about certain things because then you become questionable and you're pushed out of the safe space.
You know, sex is a difficult thing for men to talk about even with each other, especially if you do have some kind of kink.
Because you're not allowed to be vulnerable. You're not allowed to be weak. You're not allowed to fail. And a lot of people that, when you say the suicide rates, you give up because you have nowhere to turn.
I kind of disagree with you on the fact about that pressure is causing. I think it's more the lack of support and guidance for a lot of guys. Like, they don't know where to turn. Like a lot of guys, you know, suicide, I think, is like when you lose hope, right? So they just don't have hope.
What about not wanting to go get it? Because there's places to be, there's people to go. You can go to church.
I mean,
you can go to therapy.
As
There's
much as
places
you
to
say
go.
that, but I don't feel like, you know, when you say guys don't want to express weakness, I think taking that step is hard for a lot of men, because then that expresses weakness. It's hard for a lot of guys.
You know what's interesting? That what I'm hearing is that as men, you also are victimized by the sexist expectations of masculinity.
It also makes it hard for men to love themselves and love themselves enough to understand that they're in trouble, you know. And I know that's something that happened in my life. It was before I did finally go to therapy and get the demons out that I needed to get out. It took me meeting a woman who actually made me want to love myself.
You found a woman who gave you peace and changed you a lot. Well, great if a man is dating a woman and she doesn't like that he's not masculine enough. It's kind of like, to me, I feel like too bad for him. He should go find someone else. That's part of the dating scene. Everyone has things that they like and things that they don't like.
I feel like your preference is your preference, but at like some point, I think it's like noteworthy and responsible to like understand where those preferences or like originate.
Not necessarily. I think our life experiences form what we really want in our dating life. And because I grew up in a broken home and I didn't have a man in the house, I want a man who gives me security and protection. I don't think me deconstructing masculine is going to do that for me. I was missing that in my childhood, and that's what I want in a man.
I tend to diverge from like the Freudian daddy issues stuff when it comes to like what
Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. I want a man who gives me security.
Thank you. I think Freud.
Is that feminine energy happening right there?
If I'm with a woman, and the bad dates I've had is when I'm like talking about my problems, I'm complaining about something, I'm not going to see that woman. If I'm projecting more strength, and I'm more charismatic, I'm positive, I'm probably going to see that woman. So I think as much as like, guys, you know, you want guys to be vulnerable, that doesn't work a lot of times. And I think it just comes down to that.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what it is. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
And it sounds like a lot of you are saying that's wrong.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it is what it is.
I just think that society teaches you have to be a certain way.
And that's really...
And that's my issue. Because if this is who you are, your character, right, it just blossoms into this person that loves to pay for dates, loves to open doors, and loves to walk in the house, then that's fine. But when society tells you that from a young boy, that's the only way to be as a man. This is the only way to be. And you think about things like, say, people on the down low that don't want to come out till later because they're scared of societal pressures, right? You should be able to be whoever you want without society telling you you have to be this way in order to fit in this box.
Pressure is on like the body. Like pressure is to be buff, to like look good.
There is a certain pressure, I guess you can call it, for guys to look a certain way, especially if they're trying to attract women. So I think it comes down to just men who look a certain way tend to look more competent. They can protect.
I was just going to add on to what you were saying. If a guy looks fit, if a guy looks strong, okay, as a girl, she's probably thinking, if I'm on the street and somebody tries to do something to me, I know that he can handle it.
I also think generally, like, guys who don't have the body that they're looking for, or generally, they're not as healthy. It's not just a look thing, it's just a health thing.
Yeah, that's
you know, the body and mind are connected. If someone is strong, they're probably going to look strong, and they're probably going to feel strong. So I think when you say it's a pressure, I think it can be construed as a healthy pressure. Hey, get strong, be strong, because you're going to be a healthier and more mentally fit individual.
For
That's
example,
right,
I
baby.
was a gymnast, and I think, you know, the training that I did not only trained my body, but it winded up training my mind and making me a stronger human, period.
As the skinniest person here,
pretty skinny.
You skinny? All right. As the second skinniest person here. No, it's like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, you do. I've had a bunch of girls like friend zone me, and I'd be like, why? And they're like, you're just too skinny. And I'd be like, damn. I mean, they kept it so real, I can't.
That's, yeah,
but I'm
kind
like,
of him to say that, yeah. Is saying that there is a good and natural connection between like feeling good, healthy habits, looking good, and that there's a masculine ideal to that of some sort. Does anyone disagree with that here?
I do. Body diversity exists across like multiple spectrums, and I think that it's unfair to like only attribute like mental fortitude and like mental strength to like physical strength. Not having like a perfectly in shape body doesn't necessarily mean you're unhealthy by any means. And I also don't think it necessarily means that you like lack mental fortitude.
I don't think I'm saying that to look strong is the only way to be mentally strong. I think as long as you feel like you have a competent physical body, I think that's going to benefit your mental health.
How do you define competent?
Yeah, I think in terms of what you're trying to do. So are you a student? Like, what are your endeavors in life?
Me?
Yes.
I'm a student athlete.
Okay, what kind of sport?
I'm a springboard diver.
Okay, do you train to do springboard diving?
Yeah.
Okay, and do you feel good when you train and you do well on the springboard?
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. If you feel competent at the endeavors you're trying to do, I think that's
But I think
what
that there
contributes to
are
a
lots of
mental.
like non-athletic people who may not be in like the same physical shape as like an athlete would be, who are competent in what they're trying to do because that like action has nothing to do with like their like.
So that's where I disagree with you. That's where I
Yeah.
disagree with you. I think some people who don't realize the potential for their physical to blend into their mental is something that needs to be talked about. I think it's undervalued.
It's not that you have to work out to have a competent mind. It's that working out does help with competency. We already know when you work out, endorphins are released, people feel better. There's so many times I wake up, I don't want to go to the gym. It's going to be the worst day ever. I'm in a bad mood. I go, my endorphins are released. I'm great. I'm woken up. Like we have the science for that. So
Especially I think
not
it
like
plays very little. We've had presidents in wheelchairs that were very confident, successful men who couldn't walk. And so I'm going to say that it doesn't define you as a man.
But is this societal pressure to be in shape for men.
I don't-
And then when I don't like when my stomach, when I'm having sex, and my stomach like is over her butt or whatever. Like I want to eat less, me, but
Paul can
nobody's
change
like, yo,
that.
you're fat.
We've spent all this time like deconstructing masculinity and all these things, but then it seems as though if a woman or someone dating says, hey, I want a swole guy, suddenly it's like, sorry, I don't think that's a societal pressure. That's what that woman wants and she's entitled to have.
But I also, you know, I have body type.
Yeah, I agree with
preferences.
that.
Like I'm not going to say what it is, but there's certain girls where I'll go on and I'm like, you don't really have what I'm looking. I don't say that because that's the dick, but in my head, I'm just like, this isn't gonna work.
So it's one thing to have a preference and another thing to make like a sweeping like conclusion and then like broadcast it everywhere.
No, people are entitled to date their preference.
Because when you look at statistics, they say that, what is it, like 70% of CEOs are over the size 6'4", for example. So there is amongst men a pressure to be bigger, and bigger men tend to be in charge. And that's proven, statistically proven. And so there is a pressure for men who are naturally smaller, naturally overweight, naturally not as fit, to become fit or to become bigger.
Well, and every one of us here have heard little man syndrome. We've all
Who hasn't heard
every
that
one
saying?
of us have
He's got Napoleon syndrome. He's got little man syndrome.
That's a thing, though.
What is big dick energy?
It's when confidence crosses the line of arrogance. That's exactly.
People have told me I have BDE.
You have BDE?
Yeah, people told me I had BDE.
You did in that back room.
Not to show off.
Even he said, look at that.
I think BDE is like just a confident man. I don't think it's an arrogant man. I don't find arrogance to be big dick energy. I find it to be insecure. If you're arrogant, you're trying to like, I
find it so odd to equate somebody's like the size of their genitals to like the quality of their character. Like what? That's nobody's
There's a lot of
business.
optics. It's more of just like a metaphor.
I don't agree.
Yeah, for confidence.
But
It's not really like
then it comes back. Now we're getting into like a deeper conversation, which like some men see the value based off the size of what they're carrying between their legs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like that's why the conversation of big dick energy comes into place, because people feel as though like a man that's like more. That's packing more down there, you know what I mean, is more like, one, they're better in bed, they're like more confident people, they're exuding a certain energy. So that like, the stereotypes, so the stereotypes associated with having a big dick.
The lack of a need to overcompensate to society because you're adequate.
You know what you got.
You walk with confidence because you can tell when somebody's putting on because they lack in certain ways. And men, me, and people I know, equate manhood and masculinity to their dick size and how much money they got. Like, it's like, yo, you feel more confident.
And sometimes that kind of stuff bleeds into violence. And you see that in domestic violence situations, like men are like the perpetrators of that by and large. There's something wrong with masculinity when it becomes violent.
100%. I also think because of testosterone and a number of different things, men are inherently more violent.
But being able to control it, that's the important. It's being able to control it.
That's where the responsibility comes in.
I think, you hear the whole saying, like, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And I think there's a lot of wisdom behind that saying.
Oh, George Orwell said people sleep peaceably in their beds at night because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. I think that's a big thing, but the key is to be ready, to have the ability. And also the humility and the confidence to not use it unless it's absolutely necessary.
I'm just going to drop some statistics here regarding domestic violence. The CDC reported that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will be a victim of domestic violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Meaning 43% of domestic violence victims are men, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And domestic abuse shelters in the U.S. for women currently number 2,000. And they turn away men. But for men, guess how many domestic violence shelters there are in the country? Agree. Sure, there's a slight majority of female victims, but how can that excuse deny men help? Couldn't this be considered gender discrimination? Think about it this way. Roughly 78% of all suicides are men. If suicide prevention services only served men, wouldn't we see that as gender discrimination against women immediately?
I don't think we teach boys that enough because I think promoting violence is extremely toxic.
Is there something inherently violent about masculinity?
Inherently violent? I don't think so. If a majority of men were bad, evil, violent, a lot of us would not be sitting here today. Okay, we'd still be in the Stone Age. You know what I mean? That's why I kind of push back against that idea that inherently men are violent, inherently masculinity is bad, is violent, because I don't believe that that's true.
Why do you think that such a vast majority of mass shootings are done by men?
I think that's a mental health issue. I think that, and this is why we're talking about men in crisis. Yeah, because men are more willing to do what they have to, to not do what they have to do, but to take action in terms of that. And that's how we talk about this, men in crisis. A lot of those mass shooters are males because a lot of males, they don't know how to have an outlet or to find outlets to talk about what their issues are.
We know that these mass shooters, most of them are white males. We know that. So when I talk to a lot of white males that have traditional values, say, or maybe a traditional upbringing, they feel like they've been made to be the villains of society. And so I feel that pressure a lot of times. I feel like, hey, like when we're having this conversation, even I hear words like patriarchy, traditional society, right? So I feel like I'm being put in a box and made to be the villain. And I hear this from a lot of white males. I feel like I'm the bad guy. I feel like I'm the villain. So maybe at some point, mentally, they're breaking and becoming that villain. They're becoming that monster that they've been made out to be.
Be the exception. Yeah. If you're worried about being put into a box that is one that is like clearly harmful based on like what people are doing, then don't do that. Mass shooters is like obviously like a sensitive topic, but a lot of them are like men with like little to no friends who like go out and in like a burst of rage commit like atrocities. And I don't think that it has to do with how they're hardwired as men. I think that it has to do with how society like treats people like that.
I don't think that men have been taught emotional intelligence throughout life, right? We know, so we respond with anger. All right, if I'm disappointed, if I feel resentment, or I feel contempt, or I feel embarrassment, or I feel jealous, or any of these things that fall under that one thing, we respond with one way. And if we learn how to communicate better, if we were able to say, yo, you know what? I resent that you spoke to me that way. Or, I feel jealous, of whatever. If it was okay for men to express those things, we wouldn't feel a need to just go, you know what? Fuck you.
You can take any two 3-year-olds. You take a 3-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. I have 2 girls. Their first instinct is to lie to me, to manipulate me, to say their sister said this when she didn't. I have a friend that has all boys. You know what they do? They throw a fire truck at your head. Bam. That's a natural response. That's not a learned behavior. They're taught.
Oh, that's totally a learned behavior. Yeah, and you give kids only like behavior. Cars and gun and G.I. Joe action figures and give girls Barbie dolls. Like you.
I don't think you could say it's one or the other. I think there is some interplay between both.
Thank you guys for your honesty, your like willingness to go to uncomfortable places, willingness to debate one another. Yeah, I'm interested to see like what sticks with me like in days to come after our conversation, because I think so many things were raised in such sort of a diverse perspective group. Thank you.
My friends, being a traditional masculine man is valid and necessary in our modern world. It's about finding that sweet spot between strength and sensitivity, assertiveness and empathy, leadership and collaboration. It's about rejecting the less virtuous aspects of traditional masculinity, such as cruelty and disrespect. But we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can still be strong, courageous, independent, and assertive without trampling over others or becoming overbearing. It's important to define masculinity for ourselves and not let society dictate our identity. As men, we can still be providers and protectors without diminishing the capabilities of women. Expressing emotions is not a sign of weakness, but it's important to maintain composure and moderation. Being a gentleman is not only okay, but necessary. It isn't and was never about undermining a woman's capabilities. It's about showing respect, consideration, and a willingness to protect and provide. Period. Embracing your physical strength and competitiveness, but controlling it. Crucial. Traditional masculinity is okay because it means taking care of ourselves, being fit, and striving for excellence in various aspects of life. Success and achievement are not socially dirty words. They are and always will be the result of hard work and determination. Finally, leadership. As men, we have natural leadership qualities, but we need to remember to stop short of dispelling the perspectives and efforts of others. True leadership involves knowing when to lead and when to follow. So, my friends, go forth. Embrace all of the positive aspects of traditional masculinity, but do so with wisdom, respect, self-awareness, and control. Set the standard as a thoughtful protector and provider, and make it clear that it's no longer acceptable to emasculate normal, everyday, hardworking, red-blooded men. Demonstrate that being weak is not a virtue. Most of all, show the fortitude and confidence to stand apart from the societal bullshit that is holding you back. In a nutshell, fucking win. Thanks for tuning in. I hope I've given you a unique perspective to consider. If you have a comment, please drop it. I'd enjoy seeing it. If you haven't yet, it would mean a lot if you hit those subscribe and like buttons. Oh, and we've got shows dropping into our new Apple podcast station every day. So if you're out driving, you're at work, you're at the gym, the Boulder Zone is your keyword. Our Spotify station is also coming up to speed too. If you have something to say or promote and want to be in the show, boulderzone.com. Boulderzone.com is where you need to go for that. Just click on the contact tab and opine with your particulars. We've got a cool blog there too if you'd like to do a little light reading. There's a plethora of manhood and relationship related subjects for you to explore. Ladies, if you need insight on what makes us tick, don't forget, I've got a patent pending on the Manhood Operator's Manual. Listen in, check out previous shows, all organized for easy access on the YouTube. If you prefer to go old school, we've got you covered there. Call me up at 830-206-8282. We'll be glad to address your needs via voice box. And our email address, that can be utilized for all this stuff as well. info@boulderzone.com. What about social media, do you ask? Yep, we're on them all. Just search The Boulder Zone. Come and chat, enjoy some insight and humor. I am out, friends. Until next time. You know what to do.
Get bolder.